What is up, everybody? Escape211 here. We are on the test server, and the actual changes for all the balance changes and stuff like that are live on the test server. So I wanted to do a comparison video. Now, I'm not going to do it like I usually do and go in depth on the availability, stats, and all that. I will cover some of that, but I'm going to be generally talking about the arcs versus the fragment guns, just because these are going to be very common ones to compare, especially given the changes to the arcs. So if you don't know the changes to the arcs, I will briefly go over those by looking at its stats. Overall, the damage per magazine was lowered, so it got a damage nerf overall, and the optimal range and the max range are no longer part of the perk system and are just a flat number. This used to start at a lower number and then work the way up for the optimal and max range, so it's nice that it's a flat one. However, they did get a nerf in the sense that the max range is set at 30 meters, guys. I actually thought this was going to stay at 40 meters, and then the optimal range would pan out at 30 meters, so you would have a fall off from 30 to 40 meters. However, these are both capped at 30 meters, so this not only lost overall damage, it now will have damage fall off if you use a range implant, so like from 30 meters to I think 48 will be the max, and it only goes to 30 meters to start, and and for its overall trek. So yeah, a lot of difficult hits for the arc torrents. So a lot of people are saying, well, these can be kicked to the curb. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily so in the entirety, so I want to go over this kind of stuff and look at it early, mid, and late game overall versus the fragment guns. So if we go over to the fragment guns and look at its stats, you will see that overall the damage percentage on this, I'm looking at the fragment gun 6 by comparison, the damage per magazine already at 3 stars for a rare is going to be higher than what the arc turrets are at 4 stars as an epic, which looks insane on paper, but you also have to remember that the optimal range on this is pitiful. Even as you upgrade it, it only goes to 13 meters. That is super short. Even though its max range is a little bit higher than the arc turrets, which is nice, its optimal range is really low. So that means these damage values are based on the optimal range, I'm quite sure. So that means the numbers here will actually be less than this. But all that said, let's look at how this compares in each stages of the game. So in early game, I think arcs are going to be really easy for people to just pick up and play. Because everything is a flat value now, you will be able to hit things at the range, decently right away. You won't have to worry about leveling anything up. And because it's 4 credits, it's a pretty solid buy. And, this is still going to be one where you can stomp around with Ares and do really well with. And it probably has some other decent ones that you can use as well. For frag guns, it is going to be a little trickier. Like we said, even though the damage values on paper are better, because you have a smaller optimal range, you're going to find it difficult to pair this with mechs. I think the best options would be Ares or Slingshot. Slingshot, though, is a little too fragile. Even though you can close that gap fast, it's probably more of a kamikaze build. And Ares, you're going to have to find the tricky spots to close the gap best with him. And because this only is 3-star, you may want to star it up once, and that's going to cost you. So less favorable for early game. Now, mid-game, arcs are still going to do well with their range and damage, I think, overall, but where it's going to struggle is its availability. Arcs only have 3 versions for them, the 6, the 10, and the 12. So you're going to get some odd pairings when you get into the mid-game because you're going to have to use a 6 and a 10. There's no 8. So that's going to be kind of costly because the 10 is for A coins, almost 3,000 A coins. And because you don't have something for like 20 energy very easily done, it's going to cost you again to dupe the 10s. So it's just not favorable in the availability category, even though some other aspects of the arcs are still decent here. For the fragment guns, again, yeah, that range is going to be tricky for you because you lose some damage overall with the limiting range, especially given the mechs that you have. But the set is so much better. You have a 6, an 8, a 10, a 12, and even a 14. Now the 14 is odd, you probably won't be using that, but you can get good builds at 18, good builds at 20. It's just easier to do. The actual weapons are cheap, and to start up once using the A coins, you're still going to spend less than you would with the arc. So availability favors to the frags for sure. When we get into late game, the arcs are going to hurt most from the damage loss that they have had, specifically to its main overall stat. Even though you'll be able to dual wield 12s, and that's a lot of what people do here, you know, it's going to take you a while to kill stuff, and that sustained damage is going to make some tricky encounters for you. Even if you're using something like Surge, it's going to take longer to kill your targets, and that can put you at risk. So that's going to be very difficult for the arcs, or at least more difficult in my opinion. Endgame for the Frags is where they are going to take the cake, because you have the ability to get in close to do those big damage numbers. It is going to shine very well, especially with your dash mechs and all that kind of stuff. And because it has better range and then even better availability overall, it's really no contest. The Frags just perform better for most instances. And a lot of people will have Surge or Nomad here, and those are going to be great options. Even Eclipse works pretty well, even though I think it is maybe slightly less favorable. It's still going to do well. I mean, yeah, look at those damage numbers. Even when you're not super close with this weapon, yeah, it's definitely doing super well. And that is the comparison. Generally speaking, arcs are going to be better early game. They're both going to kind of even out mid game, and then late game, the Frags are going to shine. So for new players, this is probably good news, so they know what to focus on. For spenders, probably doesn't change much because most of them are probably using Ember Guns. What this is most difficult for are long-term free-to-play players who have invested in the arcs. You can still use the arcs, but you may want to either move over to the frag guns or just wait out until you get Ember Guns. It's just the reality of the situation, unfortunately. As always, feel free to comment below, and we'll see you out there on the battlefield.